I got to talk about Big City Mayors on Friday.
We are now live.
Thank you. And welcome everybody to Community Affairs and Planning meeting this evening. I just want to let you know that the Community Affairs and Planning Committee meeting is being held electronically and live streamed on the town's website. All members in attendance are participating by audio and video teleconference, and town staff are available throughout the meeting if council members have any questions on the agenda. And for members of the public watching from home, please bear with us if we encounter any technical difficulties throughout the meeting. So I'm now going to call this meeting to order. And first, I would just like to let you know that Councillor Khan sends his regrets. He's not able to be here tonight. It's Eid and he's celebrating. It's a holiday. He's celebrating with his family. So I will go on to our land acknowledgement, and we would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is situated within the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas, more specifically, the Mississaugas of Scugog Island, First Nation signatories of the Gunshot Treaty of 1788 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. This land is and will continue to be home to the Indigenous peoples. Let us acknowledge the mistakes and traumas of the past through authenticity and support truth and reconciliation. Let us engage and celebrate Indigenous communities by being leaders of action in acknowledging the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations towards truth and reconciliation. Let us keep these principles close as we continue towards truth and reconciliation and as we move forward with kindness and respect as a community. Thank you. So first on our agenda this evening, we have a public meeting, and it's a meeting regarding an update or procedural bylaw update from Legislative Services. But before we go there, I'm sorry, we're going to do the minutes of the regular meeting, which was held April 4th in 2022. I have a resolution by Councillor Lee, and Regional Councillor Lee and Councillor Bauer that the minutes of the Community Affairs and Planning Committee meeting held on April 4th be adopted. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. That's carried. And I also have, now I have to just check with the clerk here. Procedural bylaw update. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm reading it wrong here. So before we go any further, we do have a public meeting, and I just want to ask the clerk if we've had any public approach with any kind of correspondence or request to appear before this committee tonight on the bylaw updates.
Thank you, Chair Dice. We have not received any registered comments or participants on the item this evening.
Thank you for that. So you can go ahead and with your presentation. You're on mute.
Thank you very much. So the Deputy Clerk will just be sharing my slides in a moment, and then we'll get moving. Okay, thank you. So good evening. I just have a short presentation for you tonight. It's 4 slides long. And as Ms. Moore had indicated, there are no registered speakers for tonight's public meeting, but I can confirm that public notice on this item was provided online and in print in accordance with the town's public notice policy. And again, we didn't receive any written submissions or requests to participate this evening. So the updates that you'll see before you this evening were largely prompted by a need to essentially just lay the groundwork for the way in which technology is going to change our meetings in a post-COVID environment, and just accounting for all of the upgrades that we're going to be seeing in the council chambers this fall or prior to this fall. But of course, anytime that we are reopening the procedure bylaw for a specific purpose, we do like to sort of take that opportunity to look for improvements throughout. And so we've just used this as an opportunity to tidy up some of the little shortcomings in the bylaw and try and modernize some of our long-standing practices that maybe are just no longer serving us as well as they once did. So we'll just go to the next slide. Thank you. So the first category of changes relate to technology. So firstly, we've updated the bylaw to reflect that streaming of our open meetings is now our standard practice, and that meeting recordings are considered to be public records and accessible by the general public. Secondly, we've incorporated new sections that embed the availability of remote participation in council and committee meetings as part of our normal course of business, not just a pandemic time workaround, but a feature of how our meetings will function into the future. And as you'll recall, the meeting technology that we're going to be installing in the chambers this summer will allow for hybrid meetings where council members, staff, and delegations will be able to attend either in person or virtually. And I would just note that we have, in the language that we've proposed, we've preserved the ability of council to hold fully virtual meetings just as we do now, not necessarily as a matter of routine, but just in a circumstance where, say the mayor needs to call a quick special meeting, maybe it's a legal issue, it's in camera, there's no public element, and it's time sensitive. That would be a sort of a convenient circumstance where you would use those provisions. Staff are also proposing a more modern approach to recorded votes once our new technology is installed. So what that would look like is when a recorded vote is called, the clerk would begin an allocated time period, say 30 seconds, for members to select yes or no on a control panel that's located at their seat or on their computer. And no member would be able to see how their peers have voted in the system while the voting period remains open. And then at the close of that allotted time period, the vote result would be displayed on the screen for everybody to see. So that would eventually, once it's ready, would replace the current roll call system. Next slide, please. So as you know, GGC meetings are currently held in the River Plate room under our procedure bylaw, but this room just won't have the same technological capabilities as the council chambers. So no live streaming or recorded vote support or the ability for hybrid meetings. And as you know, it also has a much lower seating capacity, which is more important now than before at a time when physical distancing is a factor. So we are recommending that future in-person meetings of GGC be held in the council chambers. We've also proposed a change to how standing committee meetings are chaired. So the current practice of having local councillors chair GGC and regional councillors chair CAP is, I think, just a function of history. I'm not aware of any policy reason for that division. So staff are proposing a new model where CAP and GGC would be chaired by both local and regional councillors on a rotating basis in order of ascending ward number, and everybody would sort of get an even number of meetings. And we just propose this change to ensure that all council members are given the opportunity to chair a variety of meetings that are sort of a different style. Chairing a CAP meeting with a lot of public participants on a contentious planning application, for example, that's a really different type of challenge than, say, chairing an in-camera GGC meeting and all the sensitivities that can come with some of those issues. So I think this just gives all members equal experience in building those different types of skills. So that would just take effect in the new term of council, not right away. And of course, we do provide training for anyone that isn't super comfortable with that change, but just something for your consideration. We are also proposing that the mayor serve as chair for the budget meetings. Historically, local council members have rotated as budget chair. This isn't established in the existing procedure bylaw. The role of the budget chair, it's like the actual role is not really well defined anywhere. I think it's just a matter of practice that dates back some time. I'm not sure how long, but in any case, we are proposing that the mayor chair those meetings going forward. So those are the substantial changes. There are some other, some minor tinkering and reordering of sections and whatnot that we've done as well. And I know it's a little bit messy to read, but we've tried to keep those intact in the attachment to your report tonight, just so we're being really transparent about what we've changed. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions from council members this evening? Councillor Bauer? You're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director Cooper, for the report and the recommendations. I just wanted to clarify, and I think you did answer. In the report, you talked about the recorded vote, and there'd be a special button at our seats. But if we are attending the meeting remotely, there will be that function as well.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Bauer. Yes, we are still working through the mechanics of that. The system that we originally designed, that would have been a little bit of a hiccup. We would have needed to figure out sort of an alternative way to accept votes from participants who are attending remotely. But I just saw a demo last week that introduced sort of a new element of the technology that we could look at, which would make it essentially seamless for voting, regardless of whether you're physically there or at home. So stay tuned on that one, but we should be able to make it happen.
Great. Thank you very much. That was my only question.
Any further questions? Councillor Lee, Regional Councillor Lee?
Just very quickly on that recorded vote concept then, should there be any technical issues, the clerk still reserves the right to do a roll call, I assume, or no?
Yes, that's correct. That's provided for in the wording of the bylaw.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Anything further from anyone? Thank you. Appreciate your presentation. So I do have a motion here that the revised procedure bylaw included in this report be forwarded to a future council meeting for approval. Moved by Councillor Moran, second by Councillor Mayor Collier. All in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you. The next item on the agenda tonight is a presentation from the Planning Department, and a report was included as well in Bill 109, the More Homes for Everyone Act. And I believe Mr. McCullough is doing the presentation tonight and speaking to that. Is that correct?
That's correct. Thank you, Chair Dies. Just give me a moment while I bring the presentation up. All right, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Sean McCullough. I'm the Supervisor of Planning Policy and Research here at the Town of Ajax. And tonight I'll be providing an overview of Bill 109 and staff's comments. So Bill 109, which is called the More Homes for Everyone Act, was introduced into the legislature on March 30th of this year. This act proposes amendments to the Planning Act, the Development Charges Act, City of Toronto Act, the New Home Construction Financing Act, the Ontario New Homes Warranties Plan Act. However, tonight, staff's comments will focus on amendments to the Planning Act. So this act implements some of the recommendations from the Housing Task Force report that was released back in February. And back in on March 30th, the province released a number of bulletins on the Environmental Registry of Ontario for a 30-day consultation period. And we felt that even at that time, this was a short consultation period. However, in a highly unusual move, on April 14th, Bill 109 actually received royal assent before the end of the consultation period. So as such, some of the amendments are actually already in effect, the ones that I'll be discussing this evening, while others will take effect over the course of the next year between now and January 2023. However, staff do feel it's important that these comments still be submitted to the province for consideration. So first, I just want to provide a brief overview of the amendments. So they include suspension of the timelines for appeal of a non-decision by the minister, or for a minister approval of a regional official plan amendment. And this also enables them to refer the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal for recommendation. Refunding development application fees, and this one I'll go into greater detail in a moment. Within transit-oriented communities, the legislation prescribes maximum parkland rates and enables the minister to identify and transfer what we call encumbered land to the municipality and count it towards required parkland dedication. And I'll discuss that one again in a moment. For plans of subdivision, so there is the proposal that there is an effect now that the minister can limit what conditions that a municipality can impose on draft approval of a plan of subdivision. So while little details have been provided, the task force report had identified that a desire to establish standardized conditions across the province. In terms of with plans of subdivision, there's another amendment that will allow municipalities to extend draft approval for plans of subdivision for plans that have lapsed. For site plan control, approval is now required to be delegated to staff, and the approval timeline is extended from 30 to 60 days, as well as there's a new complete application requirement, which is similar to zoning bylaw amendments and official plan amendments. The minister may also prescribe matters that municipalities are required to report on. Again, we don't have details on this item, but a lot of the talk seems to focus on numbers of housing units and applications in process, things of that nature. There's another item to require municipalities to accept surety bonds. And we're also required to review community benefits charge bylaws if we establish one every 5 years now. And then finally, there's the creation of the Community Infrastructure and Housing Accelerator tool, which I'll also discuss in a few moments. So for the comments relating to site plan approval, the town already has delegated site plan approval to staff, and staff already generally follow a complete application process, so this would just formalize it. Therefore, we don't have any concerns related to these items. Staff, we also do support the extension of site plan approval timeline from 30 to 60 days. However, this timeline is still too short and unrealistic given the complexity of some of the applications that we're currently processing. For subdivisions, staff support the allowance to extend draft approval, provided that it remains at the sole discretion of the municipality. While details on the limitations that the province may place on conditions of draft approval for plans of subdivision haven't been released, staff feel that having the flexibility to impose various conditions of approval can help speed up the process, and therefore we'd like to see this amendment repealed. There currently are no transit-oriented communities within Ajax. However, so these are locations that are along the new transit priority lines. So they're along the Ontario line or the Young Subway extension. However, there is a provision that new transit-oriented communities could be prescribed in future legislation. So there is the potential that we may see these in the future as the province rolls these out. So we felt that it was important just to include some of our comments on this item. So we do have concerns with the requirement to convey encumbered land to the municipality and have that count towards parkland dedication. So encumbered land is land that could have an easement on it, for example. And that easement may limit what can be built on top of it. We also wouldn't have any say as to where those locations are because they generally follow infrastructure lines and things of that nature. So we feel that only in situations where that land fits into the municipality's vision for a transit-oriented community, that it should be considered. In terms of the community benefit charge bylaws, staff don't have any concerns with reviewing that every 5 years, as that can be aligned with our development charge background study and bylaw update. And then as well as we would hope that the amendment or the ability for council to pass a resolution that amendment is not required. And that was something that was included in that legislation as well. While the town is completing a pilot project for surety bonds, staff do not support the requirement or the amendment to require the municipality to accept surety bonds. Ultimately, it's the municipality that will accept the infrastructure in many situations and also pursue delinquency against an applicant. And it should be up to the municipality to decide how they're securing or ensuring the performance of some of these projects and infrastructure construction. One of the biggest and most concerning amendments relates to the refunding of application fees. The legislation would require that the municipality refund in full or part submitted application fees if council or staff do not make a decision within the prescribed time. So at a very high level, this process could lead to a revenue loss of approximately $1.2 million for the town if refunds are provided for these types of applications. And not to mention, there is potential for increased legal costs and if applications have to go to the Ontario Land Tribunal in the future. As many municipalities operate on a cost recovery basis, this may result in reduced staffing levels, which will just compound the issue as well. Alternatively, the taxpayer may need to fund increased staffing levels to try and meet some of these timelines. Staff do not support this and strongly urge the province to repeal this amendment. As staff have identified before, these timelines are unrealistic and they do not acknowledge the complexity of processing these applications. And even in the staff report, I've identified how those timelines have actually been shortened under this government. There are also many factors that are outside of a municipality's control. So one of the biggest issues in obtaining timely responses from applicants. The process requires response or revisions to drawings and documents by applicants to address technical issues. It's not uncommon for the applicant to take months or even years in some cases to respond to the municipality. And refunding application fees actually incentivizes the applicants to submit poor quality work or delay their response. The town also circulates applications to external agencies and ministries responsible for matters related to items such as public safety. This could include conservation authorities, pipeline companies, railway companies, and aviation industries, to name agencies, to name a few. So these agencies and ministries often do not respond quickly, and these are matters that should not be rushed, and coordinated response is needed. Ultimately, refunding application fees will remove the ability for applicants and the municipality to work together on mutually agreeable solutions. And this will result in more friction and lead to more appeals to the Ontario Land Tribunal. And as I indicated, requiring additional staff time and legal expenses. One small improvement, though, that we have included in our staff report that we think that the province could include is where we refer to as stopping the clock. When the application is returned to the applicant or we're waiting on comments from a technical agency, this would allow each other to track progress and also potentially reduce appeals. However, this is not to say that the application fee should still be returned, as the timelines continue to remain unrealistic. And we need to continue to fund staffing levels. Next up, so Bill 109 also introduced the Community Infrastructure and Accelerator tool. There was also a guideline that was released for consultation. This tool just formalizes the minister's zoning order process that's been taking place over the last couple of years. Or it's an extension of Bill 66, the Open for Business Bylaw, which was formerly considered by the province. The tool would require resolution from a council to request an accelerator tool and can be used for basically any type of development, which I've listed here in the 4 bullet points. They're very broad categories, and it almost includes any type of development. Any proposal could also be exempt from the provincial policy statement, provincial plans, and municipal official plans, and the minister could impose conditions requiring further consultation or requiring a plan to identify how the environment would be protected or mitigated. So staff have commented that the tool should be required to comply with the provincial policy statement, provincial plans, and municipal official plans to ensure that matters of provincial significance are protected, for example, provincially significant wetlands. If the tool is used, it should only be used to bring zoning into conformity with official plans more quickly, similar to what we saw on the Annandale site. Further, the consultation requirement should be expanded to ensure a fulsome consultation process is followed with agencies, upper tier municipalities, conservation authorities, neighboring municipalities, and the public, as the current process leaves it to the municipality to decide how this takes place. The tool should only be used for municipal infrastructure, community and affordable housing, and employment uses that have high job yields. And more defined criteria is also needed, such as minimum job thresholds, and they should also be released for a more robust consultation process once those guidelines have been established. So finally, and I won't spend too much time on this item, but the province also released a bulletin to seek feedback on opportunities to increase missing middle housing. So this generally refers to alternative housing forms such as duplexes, triplexes, walk-up apartments, things of that nature. So staff agree that there are challenges, such as residents accepting different housing forms within their neighborhoods. And we've identified in our comments, and I know that this is also something that council's vocalized in the past, that educational tools to support missing middle housing is needed, and the province should explore ways to deliver this to the community. The development industry also needs to do their part and provide missing middle housing. Therefore, staff have suggested that municipalities should be permitted to require a minimum percentage of alternative housing units within a new development and have this requirement shielded from appeals. Finally, the proposal also looked for other good examples of projects from around the world that support missing middle housing. And I don't think we need to look too far, but I think the City of Toronto's expanding housing options in neighborhoods project, which had various sub-projects, which had to design and add additional dwelling units to neighborhoods, permit missing middle housing, and also undertake pilot projects, which I thought were really interesting, to deliver demonstration projects to the community. The province could also help fund demonstration projects and work with municipalities, as I think these are a good visual and educational tool. And with that, as Bill 109, as I mentioned, received royal assent, we still feel that it's important to submit these comments to the province, and therefore staff are requesting council's endorsement of the comments. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
You're muted, Joanne. You're still muted.
Still muted.
How's that? So thank you for your presentation, Sean. And Regional Councillor Crawford, you had a question.
Yes, thank you, Sean, for your presentation. I'm just wondering, can you explain that whole fee structure thing again? Because, so let's say, if you can go back, I don't know if you can go back to that slide. So a developer has submitted an application, and like you said, there's all kinds of reasons why an application might take longer than the allotted time. Some of it is the developer themselves. Some of them, it could be us, and it could be external people. So if they don't do a stop watch, I think, or stop clock or something that you said, if they didn't do something like that, so it reaches to the certain point, and the refunds start to happen, but we're still talking to the developer at the point where they could get 100% refund, and we're still talking to them. Like,
excuse me.
Is that? Am I understanding that correctly? Like, that doesn't seem fair at all. Like the least.
So through the chair to Regional Councillor Crawford. So essentially that's correct. So there could, as you mentioned, there could be a situation where we are processing these applications, and then as these timelines start to come up, that we would be required to start slowly refunding back their money, but we still are trying to work forward and process that application. And then on top of that, they could even at the end of the day still appeal it to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So as I mentioned, we still feel that these timelines are very short, because if you think about, we have public notice requirements, and this isn't even our review. It's just the application comes in, we have to get it circulated out to other agencies and other departments, try to bring in that information. A lot of these applications require statutory public meetings, which require public notice, and then ultimately a decision on the application at the end. So when you think about 30 days, that happens very quickly. But you're right, we could be in a situation where we are still refunding them, or we have no money and we're still talking to them and processing their application.
So where on earth did this come out as being fair, except to the developer?
Through the chair, you're right, it's entirely in the developer's favor. This was identified in the Housing Task Force report. And like I said, this is the most concerning amendment of this whole bill.
Yeah, well, and the fact that this received royal dissent or assent or dissent or whatever it is that they get before the end of the public consultation period, like that alone is just mind-blowing. So I like the idea that you suggested. Did you say a stop clock or a stopwatch or something? Because it makes sense that if it's out of our control and out of the developer's control, that you're waiting for something to come back, the municipality should not be penalized for that. That is not, that is out of our control. Anyway, I don't like any of this, but that I really, really, really don't like. Anyway, that's my comments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Regional Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair to Mr. McCullough. To hit the timelines as prescribed through this bill, wouldn't it be necessary for the town to hire more planning staff to accommodate the influx of development applications?
Through the chair to Regional Council Lee, I think that's one of the biggest things that we would have to look at would be having, and it's not just planning staff either. It would be staff in other departments as well. We have engineering, transportation, design staff to try and process applications and get some of these other elements reviewed. Even when we start considering looking at refunding applications, there's a lot on the finance side of things as well that has to process and make sure that all that. So it has impacts on other departments as well. There are other things that we will have to start investigating, that other processes and things to adjust how we respond. But certainly that's going to be the biggest one, is adding more staff.
And I know this wasn't part of the purview of the comments, but if you were to put a dollar amount, we're talking about 1.2 million in lost revenue just because of the refund. But what is the additional costs do we approximate due to excess staff required?
Through the chair, I'm not in a position to be able to answer that question for you tonight. It'd be something we'd have to look at more closely.
I think, again, this is another example where the province is saying to the municipalities, yeah, hire more staff. It's not a problem. But they don't understand that each and every budget cycle that the 7 of us have gone through has been a painstaking process where we've had to cut services, cut passion projects, cut vital needs for the municipality because we've been downloaded extra costs. And again, I'm not even touching the 1.2 million in revenue that Regional Councillor Crawford mentioned. I'm talking about now we have to hire extra staff, right? And these are planners. These are, again, our planning department. This is the worst kept secret in Ajax. They're already overworked. We follow the planning tracker and they have tons of applications that they're trying to get to right now. Yet this government has deemed it necessary to not hear the public feedback. Right now, with royal assent, this slide we're seeing in front of us is a reality. There is no stop clock because they didn't wait to hear back from the municipalities. I have an emotion. I have a motion at the appropriate time. This is only the questions to the presentation right now. One more question to Mr. McCullough. Has the province ever repealed its own, like this term's government, provincial government has ever repealed any of its own legislation from a planning point of view? Because like he's seen, was it Bill 66, Section 10? Does that ring a bell? That seems to be something that we said was unfair. It was one of our first motions, if I'm not mistaken. And I was a Councillor Dias and myself, and we said, yeah, this is unfair. And it ended up getting repealed, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Regional Councillor Lee, that's correct. So Bill 66 was a good example where that was repealed. Bill 108 too, there was through subsequent legislation, there were a number of items from Bill 108 that were also walked back or I guess, for lack of a better term, watered down.
And don't forget, I mean, at one point, the province even had pandemic police powers that were walked back when racialized communities said, this is unfair, this is amounts to carding, what you are doing. So I guess you guys can see where I'm going with this. To repeal legislation just takes a lot of pressure from the corresponding municipalities. I think AMO, I think the big city mayors have all made emphatic statements of how this is unfair, that there is a public comment process that was not adhered to before they pushed this through. And until we can actually get an idea of a stop clock, this is the reality right now, and that is absolutely not to the benefit of our residents, who are the taxpayers. So, Chair, once we bring forward the report, I have an amendment. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McCullough.
Thank you. Councillor Moran?
Thank you so much, Chair. So my question is for you to Mr. McCullough. Surprise, surprise. I have a question in regards to the Ontario Housing Affordability Task Force. So that was and I guess I could Google this, but from your point of view, that was a task force that was commissioned and created by the province to look at housing in Ontario and all the challenges it has. It had 50 recommendations, correct? And that came out, I think, this year, correct? Like earlier, like winter months, January, February?
That's correct. It was back in February.
Yeah, and I remember, oh, look at this. And there was 50 recommendations in there. So Bill 109 chronologically came out after that, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And in your opinion, or if you can answer us factually, how closely does Bill 109 mirror the task force? Like, is it close? Is it something that the province, in your opinion, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm just wondering, because the task force had some really good recommendations in there. It was kind of exciting. And it was like, so how closely, in your opinion, does Bill 109 mirror that task force findings? Or maybe I'm wording that, I don't mean to be contentious.
Yep, through the chair to Councillor Tyler Moore. Certainly there are a number of the recommendations from that task force report that is reflected in this legislation. So those recommendations were wide ranging. One of the recommendations, for example, was to penalize municipalities for not making decisions on planning applications. So the refund one is directly tied to that, one of the recommendations in that report. As I mentioned in my presentation, another one, for example, having standardized conditions across the province for draft plan approval for plans of subdivision. That was another recommendation from the task force report. And now the province, we're seeing some of the legislation come forward that they want to restrict what conditions we can have. Certainly not going quite to a standardized approach, but starting to look at an in-between, I guess, and limiting what municipalities could ask for as a condition of approval. So there are a number of recommendations reflected in this, but certainly not all of them.
Okay. And if I may, Chair, so your reservations are obviously concerning to us because, when a staff report comes down one way or the other, we as a council take it very seriously. Do you know if the other 445 municipalities across Ontario, are you getting the sense that those municipalities in Vaughan or in Nipigon or across the province are also having the same reservations? Is this just an Ajax thing?
Through the chair to Councillor Tyler Moore again. So the comments that I have seen from a number of municipalities across the province, they are reflective of what we've said in our comments. I know the region had their comments, which were somewhat similar. They obviously are impacted a little bit differently than we are. But certainly we've seen comments from the city of Hamilton, the town of Whitby, all of which have been reflective of what is generally indicated in our comments.
Okay, well, that's good to hear, because when you take into consideration what Regional Councillor Crawford and Lee both alluded to, maybe we can move the needle on this. And it's good to hear that other municipalities are also concerned. Thank you so much for allowing me these questions, Chair.
My pleasure. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Sean. Thank you for the report and the presentation. First, I'll just start with my own comment that I cannot believe that the province would give an April 29th deadline and then go ahead and ignore all of that and push it forth 2 weeks early. It's shameful, actually, in my opinion. And I really think it's very dangerous, how you mentioned in the report, that it would incentivize poorly completed applications because, if it takes a long time, they're going to get their money back. So I think that's a very valid point, and I hope that is recognized. And before the January 1st implementation of the refund, that somebody will realize it's a bad idea and reverse that decision. But my question, I had two questions actually, not about that. It was about the comments you made about site plan control. And it's just my own curiosity, actually. What is a complete application?
Through the chair to Councillor Bauer, that's a good question. So essentially what a complete application is, and this is the same process that we would follow for a zoning bylaw amendment, for example. So each application has the standard requirements that we would normally look for. So for a site plan, obviously there's going to be a site plan drawing, and there's a number of other drawings that may be required that are standardized. And then we also go through what's called a pre-consultation process. where staff and other agencies review an application to determine what types of other drawings and studies may be required, because every application is different and they have different requirements. So essentially, there's a list of documents that is returned to the applicant. And then before the municipality starts the process of circulating those documents out and having them reviewed, we go through the checklist to make sure that everything's been submitted, to make sure that we're in possession before. So if something's missing, we would deem it incomplete, and then that clock does not begin. Now, the challenge we have with that process, though, is these documents still require review and time to take a look. So we could receive a report, an engineering report, and these documents are being reviewed by planners. To a planner, it may look like it's accurate and it's correct, but until it gets to the engineer and that review is completed, we don't fully know. But unfortunately, through a complete application, we can't stop we would still deem it incomplete if we were in possession of that report.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's just organization and preparation, really, and the handy use of checklists.
And we essentially do follow that process currently. It's not formalized, but even from a time perspective, it's a good practice to make sure that we do have everything, and then before we are sending it out to our agencies and our partners to make sure they have everything.
Very professional. And the other question I had about site plan control was the comment about delegating approval of site plan applications to staff. What does that mean? Is it not staff that approves site plan applications?
That's right. So that was why, through the chair to Councillor Bauer, my comments, staff didn't have concerns with this one because there are still municipalities across the province where all site plans do go to council still. So here at the town, we do have delegated authority to staff already. So we've already taken that step.
Got it. Okay, which makes sense. The planners are the guys who know the stuff, so you should be doing that. But thank you very much. Those were my questions.
Thank you. Regional Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for letting me back in. Through you to Sean, is there anything good in this?
So through Chair Dyes to Regional Councillor Crawford. So there are a handful of things that staff have identified that, that we feel are reasonable. The complete application for site plan approval, just formalizing that, I think that's a good move. Delegating into site plan approval to staff across the province, and I think that there are some good items within here, but by and large, I think for the most part, there are some concerning items.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you. Sorry, thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any other questions? I think, Mr. McCullough, all of mine have been answered. I mean, it looks like the province wants to become a municipal planner. And all of the responsibilities we have, they're chipping away at. And I believe because there's a crisis in housing, which I have to say the developers created, and with urban sprawl, and now they're unaffordable. So we're having to look at other issues. But it's still so very, very important that, the public is a part of that process as well as council. And I think there's some real challenges here and some real issues because as municipal planners for the town of Ajax, we look to planning that best suits our community as much as we can. And we do listen and take into consideration people's concerns. So it's this is really, I think, just the thin wedge in, and it's very concerning. And the cost is going to fall on the burden of the cost will be on the taxpayers, the property taxpayers. So I appreciate your report, and it was strong and it was to the point, and I really appreciate that. So I do have it before me. That this report, the council received this report, and I'm going to read it if you don't mind, because I think it's important to the public. So Moved by Mayor Collier, seconded by Councillor Moran, that Council received the report entitled Bill 109 for More Homes for Everyone Act 2022. Town of Ajax comments. For information and endorse staff comments outlined in Section 2. Number 2, that the province repeal the following amendments to the Planning Act and engage in meaningful consultation with municipalities. Refunding of development application fees for zoning bylaw amendments and combined official plan amendments and site plan amendments. B, restricting conditions that a municipality can impose for draft plan approval of a planned subdivision. And C, requirement for encumbered land to be conveyed to the municipality within transit-oriented areas and contributing to the development of parkland dedication, the amount. Number 3, that the province amend the Planning Act to extend legislative timelines for municipal decisions on official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications, and further extend legislative timelines for site plan applications, following extensive consultation with municipalities to better reflect the complexities of processing planning applications. Number 4, that the province amend the Planning Act to specify that the legislative timelines for a municipality to make a decision on an application are suspended when an application is with the applicant and when the municipality is waiting and or addressing technical comments from external agencies and or provincial ministries. So stop the clock, as you spoke to. Number 4, that the province release detailed targeted criteria and guidelines for the Community Infrastructure and Housing Accelerator tool, provide more detail and expand consultation requirements, and ensure that any order conforms to provincial plans, the provincial policy statement, and municipal official plans. Number 6, that the copy of this report and Council's resolution be submitted to the Minister or the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing and sent to the Honourable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, Honourable Steve Clark, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Region of Durham and Durham area municipalities. And I believe, Councillor Lee, you had an amendment to that?
That is correct. If the clerk wouldn't mind putting up the
recording in progress.
Oh, wouldn't mind putting up the amendment on the screen, please. So moved by myself, seconded by Regional Councillor Crawford, that the motion be amended by replacing clause 1 with the following. The council requests that Bill 109 be repealed, and failing that, the report PDS 2213 regarding Bill 109, More Homes for Everyone Act 2022 be endorsed and submitted to the province. So if I may, Chair, I'd like to speak on this.
Recording stopped.
Chair, may I? Sure. You're on mute, but I'm going to assume.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. We passed a similar motion unanimously at Regional Council. It is not unheard of that this current Ontario government will repeal legislation. Like I asked Mr. McCullough, Bill C6, 108, the police powers, that's just 3 in recent memory. 2 of them are planning related. I think it's fair to say to this government that you can't just force this down the municipality's throat and expect us just to swallow it and say thank you. I think it's fair to say, for us to say as a municipality, go back, let's do proper public consultation where you don't pass this through royal assent before you even give the feedback. Because I remember at last council meeting, I had asked Mr. Romanowski, I was like, aren't our comments due soon? And he more or less said, they're done. And that is absolutely unfair. It is not transparent. It is not accountable. This is not good governance. And I think by asking them to send it back, it sends a clear message that the town of Ajax, while we respect the authority of the Ontario government and their ability to pass this type of legislation, we do not condone or endorse legislation that puts the burden of developer profits back on our taxpayer, which is what this will do. Like I said, we have millions we're going to lose in revenue. We have, not counting the millions we could possibly lose in staffing, additional staffing. It's unnecessary. And I don't see the Ontario government step up saying, we're going to provide the money for the staffing. If that's the case, it's a very different scenario. But right now, they're asking us to ask our taxpayers to front up the money so that the developers can speed through their applications, and that is not a fair process. So with all due respect, I think we should repeal this. And the second part is, if the government's not going to repeal it, then here are our comments. But I think we should send a clear message first and foremost that we do not accept this type of governance. If you're asking for our feedback, then hear our feedback before you pass laws. And obviously, at the appropriate time, I'd appreciate a recorded vote. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions regarding the amendment? Regional Councillor Crawford.
Yeah, Regional Councillor Lee basically said it all in one mouthful for sure. But I think that we're not going to be alone in this ask. I think that you are going to see, because it was passed unanimously at Regional Council, that tells me that each of the lower tier municipalities are going to be coming through with probably very similar motions on their own. Big city mayors, even they have not had a chance to have a conversation or any kind of recommendation come out of their committee, which, as we know and we've been told, is a very powerful group of people when they represent 70% of the population. So I think that it is absolutely wrong to be passing something during the consultation period. It tells you they don't care about what we were going to say anyway. And so I cannot support anything that doesn't follow through the process. And I don't know where the province became the expert in planning. That basically says that what the lower tier municipalities have as expertise, they don't matter. They don't matter because they don't want to listen to them. So 100%, obviously I support this. And it's very disappointing that they would just literally think that we would just take this and not fight back. So yes, very happy to second this.
Thank you. Councillor Moran.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, even though I was the seconder in the original motion, looking at this even deeper, I concur with my council colleagues and I will be supporting this amendment. And that's all I have to say. I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments on the amendment? So I'll call the vote then. All in favor of the amendment?
Sorry, Chair. I had asked for a recorded vote, if that's okay.
Okay, I'm sorry, you did. So can I ask the clerk to do a recorded vote, please?
Yes, on the amendment, in favor or opposed, Regional Councillor Lee.
In favor.
Councillor Tyler Moran.
In favor.
Councillor Bauer.
In favor.
Councillor Crawford.
In favor.
And Chair Dies.
In favor. Thank you.
All your is in favor.
I'm sorry, you're still here. Good. Thank you. That's carried then. So, and the motion as amended, all in favor? Any opposed? Mayor Collier, you're okay?
I'm in favor. I moved it.
Thank you. Okay, so that concludes the items on our agenda this evening, and thank you very much. So I have a motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Bauer, seconded by Regional Councillor Crawford. So thanks, everybody.
Call to vote, Chair.
All in favor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great job, Chair. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, great job. Good night, everyone.